So, as promised, wanted to go through and do a quick walkthrough on the practice problem for quiz 2. So this one is in the practice quiz there. We've got our multi-choice and whatnot, but those ones have little explanations. I figured that actually talking through the modeling problem here would actually be a bit more useful, so figured we'll do that for today. Anyway, for this one, we want to read over the instructions first. I'm going to model the following part using only tools covered up to Lab 6. So, extrudes, reference planes, revolves, and then Lab 6. And then we're uploading our solid part file. So, we're going to ignore any of the ones that start with a little tilde $sign. And we want to save our file and close SolidWorks before submitting in order to make sure that we don't get any of those temp files in accident. So, looking this one over, we can see that we've got ourselves a part. So we're going to open a new part file there. And this one is in millimeter units. So once our part loads in, we're going to set our units to mmgs. And from there, let's take a quick look over what we've got. So, at the start of our object, we do see that we've got some hollowness to it. So we've got a TYP here, stands for typical, and that sort of sets a default thickness then for our object. So that's probably a shell thickness. And we see that this sort of main cylinder on the back of the object, that one's hollow. The earpiece itself is hollow, but the hole wizard that goes through it, based on the hole call out here, that seems like whatever happens with the shell, that adds the wall around that hole wizard. So then the hole wizard itself needs to happen before the shell feature. The little collar at the bottom also needs to happen after the shell feature, because we see that we do have these hidden lines on the inside of our object for the cylinder, but the collar itself is solid, so we don't see any hidden lines there, so that needs to happen after the shell. Alright, so as far as places to get started, I figure we can begin with the sort of main earbud component. Then we'll do a revolve to get this sort of tube on the back. Then we can do our hole wizard, so that's going to need to occur before the shell. And then we can apply our shell feature, and that's going to hollow all of that out. And also, based on the lack of hidden lines down at the bottom of our front view, that tells us that our shell is going to need to remove that bottom surface. From there, we can then do a solid offset extrude for this hexagonal collar, and then it looks like we do have some fillets applied on the outside of that, so you can see it with the dashed lines in our isometric that we do have some curved surface meshing in with another surface. So, as mentioned, we want to start with the earbud, and that is sort of a revolve from the looks of it. So revolve boss base, and I'm going to start this one on our top plane. And based on what we see in our top view here, looks like we've got main arc and then another smaller arc and some other bits and pieces of information that'll help us get the rest of the way. I generally find it useful to do our center line first, just to get us so that we've got something to work with. And then we've got a straight line down at the bottom. Use that auto transition tool that we covered earlier, bring the cursor back to the end of that arc, to the end of the line, and then back up, and then once more to sort of get to right above-ish our origin there. So we can select that endpoint, and oh yeah, one more line tool to close off our loop. Cool. So looking this over, we do see that we've got a couple of center marks for the R5 arcs, so let's dimension that. So that one's a radius of 5, and then we've got the radius of 15 for this back arc as well. But we're still underdefined. So importantly, we do have the center marks for these two arcs, but we do not have a center mark, well, an explicit center mark that we can see for the R15 arc. What we do, however, have is this little dash here and a center line sort of indicating where the middle of this is. So that little dash kind of implies that we've got the center mark for the R15 arc sitting on this bottom flat line. So if we select that flat line and grab our center mark. We actually want that to lie exactly on our origin there. So effectively that sets it up so that the middle of this arc is right in the middle of this bottom edge. Then from there, features, revolve boss base, Control 7. Yep, looks good. And check mark. Cool. So now that we've got that, let's do the hole wizard before we forget. So hole wizard works best if you select the surface first. Then we can choose our hole wizard feature. And this one is going to be a counter bore. So it's got that sort of staple shape, matches up with the staple shape there that we've got for our callout. Then we ignore the standard, ignore the type, ignore the size, ignore the fit. Well, we don't ignore the standard, actually. We need to set this to match units. So this one's going to be ANSI metric. There we go. That way it matches our millimeters. Then for our custom sizing, we do want to check the show custom sizing box, and then we can plug in our values. So it's got a diameter of 4 for the through hole, so that goes there. Then we've got a diameter of 10 for the counter bore, and a depth of 4 there. And then for the actual depth of the hole, this is going to end up being a through all. So we get the through there, and that can either mean up to next, up to surface, or through all. And here, doesn't look like there's anything that happens behind it, so just cutting through everything makes our life a little easier. Then we can pop over to our Positions tab, place down the point there for the origin, and that looks pretty good. Check mark. Cool. So there's that one sorted. Then we've got our pillar over on the back of our shape. And importantly, the dimensions for that, you see that we've got this 42 dimension going from the center of that initial revolve down to the bottom of the pillar. And then we have a separate 13 dimension that goes from the center of the revolve up to right below the cap of the pillar. So effectively what we can do is if we can locate it on that top plane, we can then do a 2-directional extrude and have it go down 42 and up 13. There's technically other ways that we could have done this to do it as a bit of a simpler feature, but this one I feel is a bit more intuitive. So we've got our circle sketch. You know it's got a diameter of 8 units based on our our section view over there. So diameter of 8. We know it's 6 units away from that vertical central axis. So that one's going to be 6, and then it's 12 units in from the front surface. So front edge, select center, 12 units. Cool. Pop back over to extrude boss base. This one, like I said, we want it to go up 13 units, and then we can use direction 2 to have it go down 42 units. Cool. So there's that. Then we get to add the little cap onto the top of it. So for this one, we don't actually have any dimensions we can use because we've already used that 8, and this R4 is in parentheses, so that tells us that it's going to be a reference dimension. But what we can do is we can convert entities on this surface. That's going to allow us to get sort of the circumference of this circle without needing to worry about recalculating it or repeating anything. So convert entities, select the face, check mark. Then we need a central axis. So I'm just going to use our line tool, and we'll draw down a vertical line that goes from the top point down to the bottom point. Then we can trim entities to get rid of half of that, and that gives us a half circle nice and fully defined for us. And then, because I want to make sure that I'm being consistent, we'll draw in our center line as well. Importantly, we do need this standard vertical line to close it off, otherwise it's going to end up getting a little upset with us. But once we've got all that in, we can do a revolve, and we'll just leave this at 360. It doesn't really matter if we do that or 180, but that caps it all off nicely for us. Then from there, we can finally do our shell feature. So it does need to remove that bottom surface, and it looks like it hollows out everything else. So we'll open up our shell. This one's got a 1-unit thickness. Show preview so we can see what we're doing. And then we do need to remove the bottom face, because if we didn't remove the bottom face, we would expect to see some more hidden lines down at the bottom of our object. Check mark. So there is that. And then if we wanted to double check our work, there is the section view tool. So we can set that up with our right view, and this looks like what we would see getting revealed in our section view on the drawing. All right, last bit, we've got this collar and then the fillets, and then we are good. So for the collar, we start on the bottom surface here, create ourselves a sketch on that face. This one is going to end up as a hexagon, so we'll use our polygon tool, 6 sides, and we want it to be centered in the middle of this circle. So if we sort of bring the cursor close to it, that looks about right. Then we can draw that out. We don't technically have anything explicitly showing us that it's right in the middle of the cylinder, but it does look fairly centralized, so it seems pretty symmetrical in our front view, and then same in the section view where it looks like it goes the same amounts forward and backwards. So because of that, and because we don't have anything telling us otherwise, we can make that symmetry assumption without any major concerns. Then in our section view, we see that we do have that 12-unit distance, showing us the depth of this hexagon. So dimensioning from top to bottom, that one is 12 units. And then, see, it still rotates freely. So this, we see that it does have a flat surface on the front, flat surface on the back. So if we just select one of these edges, we can set it to horizontal, and that'll snap it into the right orientation. From there, pop over to Features, Extrude Boss Base. We want this to begin 8 units up. So from our we can set this to offset 8 units. Hit our reverse direction to pop it into the right orientation so that it starts 8 units up. Then in our right view, we see it extrudes for another 8 units. So plug in 8 for our direction 1, blind end condition, and flip it so that it goes 8 units up from there. Checkmark. Alright, lastly but not leastly, we do have those fillets. And for those, we've got a radius of 1 here. So we can go to our fillet feature, and we do have 2 of them. So there's the one on top of the hexagon, and then it also looks like it's smoothed on the bottom of the hexagon as well. So we'll select that top edge, select the bottom edge, 1 unit radius, so we'll plug that in there. And that looks pretty much like what we would expect. Cool. So we'll hit our check mark. Click Control 7 to make sure that our orientation matches up. We are all good. And yeah. So from there, just go through, save our file, bring this over to downloads, and then you can upload it. I would recommend that you do practice with the upload to the practice quiz just to make sure that you've got the workflow down. But in general, that would be the process that I think would be a good way to use this one. You don't technically need any reference planes for this problem, but if you wanted to approach it a different way, you could, for example, create a reference plane that's 12 units in from that front surface, and then use a revolve feature to get the sort of half-sphere dome on top of the cylinder and the rest of the cylinder itself all within the same feature, instead of having it split across 2, but there isn't a major difference between the techniques at that aspect. Well, they'll both be equally correct. So, I think we'll call it there. If you've got any questions, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, best of luck studying, and I will see you for the quiz.